And how do I broach this topic today? Not exactly.
Big God 6, Big God 6, this is Isaiah 6:8 action. Blackjack, Blackjack, I need a safe house, next mission time now. Full send, over.
Hey, what's shaking, Warfighter Nation? Ron here with Warfighter Ranch and Isaiah 6:8. You know what day it is. It's SOS. A little salvation on station, because everybody needs a little close air support from time to time.
Next mission time now.
Today, a pretty tough topic. Infidelity. It's a topic that most warfighters are unfortunately all too familiar with, one way or the other. For decades, it's almost been a running joke about how rampant infidelity is in the military. And while this may be true in a lot of cases, this is definitely no joke. We talk about the back porch lights being on during the day, the mops being upside down on the front porch as a tangible and visible sign of one's willingness to engage in infidelity. I learned about this firsthand at my first duty station, Fort Campbell. This was not the rendezvous with destiny I was looking for. As a new firefighter, I was introduced to the concept of individual housing inspections in their quarters. This provided not only a broad swath of insight on how different families lived, but also inadvertently exposed me to a side of life that I had absolutely no interest in. We would show up at roll call around 7 a.m. and immediately head out in a pickup truck to one of the housing areas. We started off with Lee Village, as it was the closest to Campbell Army Airfield where I was assigned. So there we were, about 7:15, 7:30 in the morning, knocking on doors in junior enlisted housing. If you know anything about military culture, Army culture in particular, you know that 7:30 is when PT is over with and when traffic is at its morning peak. So one of my civilian counterparts, Killer Collins, and I, Private Breland, knocks on this door, and a woman answers dressed like she just robbed a Victoria's Secret catalog and was more than willing to be inspected. Woo, pump your brakes, that is danger close. In a very slick move, my partner keyed the radio on his portable, signaling the panic button, and of course we had to leave quick, fast, and in a hurry. God tells us to resist the devil and he will flee from us. We arrived at Fort Riley, Kansas in the summer of 2003, and I was there about 3 weeks before I was whisked away on a big iron bird headed to Ramadi. Over the course of my one-year tour there, Helen would tell me of what she referred to as the hens. The hens were a cluster of dependas who would sit around an outdoor fire pit most days with a consistent flow of individual male traffic coming and going at their leisure. Different guys visiting for anywhere from a few hours to a few days. This sort of thing is so deeply ingrained in our culture that we sing about it in our cadences on our morning runs, pounding in the message that it's only the mission and not Jody that matters. And yeah, we've all heard it before. If the Army wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one. Something like that. This is breaking our warfighter family. Still, while the stressors found in military culture are more than most folks can imagine, regardless, we find ourselves in a situation where our country has been at war for over 2 decades, and in its wake has left an over 80% divorce rate among combat veterans. Satan is attacking the family unit because it was God's first institution and one of his most precious. We've counseled hundreds of warfighter couples. Many have forgiven the transgression of their spouse, many have not. Now granted, this is one of the very few reasons God will allow someone to leave their marriage. How greater is it to work through that and bring glory to him in this way? So let me get real with you here. Let me run something by you. How many of you would go to a whorehouse or brothel to buy your spouse back? If you found out your spouse, male or female, was a prostitute in a brothel, how many of us do you think would go in, walk up to the management of the facility and say, hey, look, I know my wife's been whoring for the last 12 months, but I've been on deployment and I just want to pay whatever I have to pay, whatever money she owes, so I can get her back. The guy says, look, man, I'm just a sleazy pimp, bruh. You're going to have to talk to her about all that because she walked in here, came in here of her own free will and got herself into this. You got to talk to her. And imagine you walk in there to talk to her. And imagine when you walk in there, you see her again with another man. Now imagine that you go into that room and you pull her out, you hold her, you look her in the eye, and you say, look, I just spoke to the guy up front, paid for all your sessions in the future, and you don't have to do this anymore, and you don't ever have to come back here again. I just need you to come back home with me. Okay, so let's face it, most of us probably wouldn't do that. But the book of Hosea shows us here how profound God's love for her and for him is. It shows, it proves how great his love is because God showed up and accepted us in our own harlotry and brought us back through the precious blood of Jesus so that we could come back into a relationship with him. Do yourself a favor and check out the book of Hosea. It's a beautiful story written in pretty elegant detail. And people like Danielle Steele and Chandra What's-Her-Face ain't got nothing on the Bible. I'll leave you with one final thought. There is no sin that one human being can commit against another that is not able to be forgiven. True story.
Faith and spiritual resiliency are the only combination that's been proven to effectively combat both the literal and spiritual bleeding in the warfighter community. Our veteran family is deeply hurting via the epidemic suicide and divorce rates. So now is when we need to reach out in community with one another, because we will always be better together.
Keep your head up. Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back. No, don't you give up. Hey. Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back.
We're cleared hot at this time. Vet 6, this is Smoke Jumper 7. Roger that. Next mission, time now.